the executive director of the Leepa Rattner Museum of Art. This is a very, very special evening for us, especially since I've known Barton for 3 decades. I was a young teenager. But it seems like there are people in this room that have known Barton even longer than that. So we are just absolutely thrilled to welcome you all. I see former students and friends and colleagues. Thank you so much for coming and sharing this special evening with us. Before we begin, I actually want to give you a little bit of insight into Barton Gilmore's exhibition, which is celebrating his retirement at St. Petersburg College after 33 years. Recontextualizing the Atlas, 5 Decades of Barton Gilmore, is an incredible retrospective exhibition that features over 70 works, and then works that are hand-carved by his grandfather. And it's just wonderful to see how the legacy of his grandfather is incorporated into the creative process of how Barton works. So to give you a little bit of background, I have to put my readers on. And just so you know, if you go by the front desk, we have created an exhibition catalog that has a wonderful essay by our curator, Sarah Felice, who could not be with us today. But it's got some pictures, some installation shots, and it's a nice memento to remember this evening by. So be sure to pick one up at the front desk as you leave. The Leepa Rattner Museum of Art is honored to present Recontextualizing the Atlas, 5 Decades of Barton Gilmore, which is on view August 24th through December 15th, 2024, in our newly named James W. Mitchell Jr. Galleries. As the professor and department chair of photography and digital arts at St. Petersburg College for more than 33 years, Barton L. Gilmore has shaped generations of young artists. Approaching his retirement in December 2024, this retrospective exhibition celebrates Professor Gilmore's career as an artist and an educator. Recontextualizing the Atlas, as I mentioned, features 70 works that provide a bird's eye view of Gilmore's remarkable career while giving a glimpse into the inner workings of his imagination as part inventor, part historian, and artist who is on a constant quest for knowledge. And if you know Barton, you know that that is very true. He is forever curious, and he will be forever young because of that. Since childhood, Gilmore has been collecting things to create environments that give an abstract sense of place, often referring back to the source of his inspiration of the playground and the sandbox he played in at a young age. This is translated into his photography and mixed media constructions, which transport the viewer into otherworldly settings that are playful, yet architectural in nature and often allude to unfolding narratives. Through Gilmore's 5 decades of experience as a commercial photographer, fine artist, and educator, he has influenced generations of young artists to pursue a creative path. His deep knowledge and passion for the medium of photography brings out the excitement and joy in everyone he interacts with, as he encourages others to see the world from a new perspective through the camera lens. At the museum, we are grateful for the long-standing partnership with Professor Gilmore, who often used the museum as a learning lab for his students to enrich their educational experience. Over LRMA's 22-year history, he has introduced hundreds, if not thousands, of students to their first museum experience for a rare behind-the-scenes tour, study important photographic works from the permanent collection, and explore our diverse exhibitions, many of which push the medium of photography. We are thrilled to have this opportunity to work with Professor Gilmore on his retrospective exhibition to celebrate his artistic and academic career. We hope his next chapter is just as fulfilling as he carves out the time to finally pursue his more creative work. On a personal note, as a friend and a colleague, I've witnessed the evolution and growth of his work and career in academia over the course of 30 years, and am incredibly proud to have this opportunity to celebrate his legacy here at the Leepa Rattner Museum of Art. So please help me welcome Professor Barton Gilmore. welcome, Barton. We have a series of questions that have been provided by our wonderful curator, Sarah Felice, who is also a photographer in her own right, and I believe that she and Barton are kindred spirits at heart. So these words come from our curator, Sarah, and I will do my best as a longtime friend to help facilitate the conversation as Barton's images from his career scroll through behind us. So we will pass the microphone back and forth because we only have one, and it should be an exhilarating conversation, and we'll end the conversation with Q&A with the audience. Okay? So the first question is about recontextualizing perspectives. The exhibition title, Recontextualizing the Atlas, suggests shifting perspectives and going beyond face value. How do you hope the audience will engage with this theme of recontextualization, and how has it influenced your artistic practice over the years?
Hello, thank you. Thanks again for coming tonight. Thanks for the museum for having me. I'll give you something to think about here. I've always noticed in my life that I like to re-examine things that are around me, the environment, people, and people are, if it wasn't for you, my friends, colleagues, relationships, acquaintances, all this work would not be possible. So in the context of, what I want you to get out of this, I'd like you to look at yourself a little bit deeper, and maybe you can find yourself within this work. Your experiences, your fears, your accolades, your desires. Perhaps the work will enlighten you to those connections that we have together. I want to say that I'm going to first ask you a question here. And I'm going to probably anticipate the answer. I'm sure everybody today has looked at a mirror somewhere in their life today. A mirror, whether it's in the restroom, in the car mirror, somewhere today you've looked at a mirror. I think it's part of our nature, for whatever reasons, for a purpose, for decoration, for cosmetics, or perhaps maybe just to look at yourself to see what's changed about yourself. And I'm using the mirror as a metaphor for my work, because I began looking at maps. I'll come back to this. Maps at a very early age. My parents were teachers back in the late 50s. And during the summer, we had the opportunity to travel. And I was the navigator. And I looked at maps all the time. That was one of my favorite pastimes during the car travels, these epic car travels from Chicago out west, where you live in Chicago. So, and I found such an enjoyment of looking at all the roads, all the connections, where we were going, where we came from, the place with a capital P, what that meant. And I always kind of, I was really curious to know, what is this all about? Even holding the maps up to light, looking at the different layers of maps, the tentacles, it was fascinating for me. I was 5 years old. So with that map, I started asking myself at that age, and I had conversations with friends and particularly my family members, is there an internal map? Is there something beyond the mirror that we look at, that we don't see, that to me is more important than the superficiality of our appearance? Is there a map to the soul? I became interested in that. And I've never been actually very religious, but I feel like there's always been a spiritual side to me. But I was very intrigued with, well, what is the map to who I am? How do I tick? How do I function in this world? I became very enthralled with that idea. And that led to things later on that we'll talk about. But if you can walk away from this work tonight and perhaps connect to a few pieces that can connect to your inner being, and that's what this is about. This work is about me, but without you, it would not be possible. You are the proxies of this work. And I don't speak alone. A lot of artists do this. They need that contact. They need the influence of people, friends, everybody that makes it happen. So welcome to the show. And I hope you can take something away from it that enlightens you about yourself. You have an opportunity to observe yourself through my work. And that's one of the objectives.
That's incredible. I can't wait to walk through your exhibition again with that in mind. I can't wait to ask you questions. I know that we'll allude to that later. But for now, we kind of mix it up and we talk about teaching as a pathway. In your teaching, you emphasize the importance of visual literacy and helping students understand their personal identity through photography. How has your time as an educator shaped your own creative process? And what has been the most fulfilling aspect of mentoring the next generation of visual storytellers?
Every time I walk into the classroom, I'm not sure who's teaching who anymore. I really don't. The students are amazing, and they're the reason why I'm an educator. They inspire me, my work. I collaborate with them on a daily basis, not just in person, but online. I feel that they are looking for something. It's, the classes I teach are not just about teaching the skill sets of photography. It's actually, that's secondary. It's important for a job. It's important because it gives them maybe a passion that they want to pursue. But the core of my teaching is to help them learn something about themselves through photography. It's really about coming from here. And if they can attach themselves to a visual link that can describe a narrative of how they are feeling, because they want to know their identity. Young folks and even old folks like me, I mean, I will tell them and remind them that, listen, your identity is very fluid. It's not finite. It's going to constantly evolve, and it's going to shed some things about yourself and then embrace other things that come into your life. So the identity aspect is, and young folks particularly, they're looking for something. They feel important and they want to express themselves. Again, they have the same fears and desires and ambitions and dreams and discoveries that we all do, and we never stop experiencing that, ever. It's a lifelong endeavor. And I remind my students, like, if you figure this out in 16 weeks, I'm going to be particularly envious of this because I'm still learning it. Because it never stops. It's a lifelong exploration. I tell my students, usually the first day or the second day, how do you infuse a sense of your personal identity into your work? And they usually pause a little bit. And I remind them that's a profound statement. It's something that will last a lifetime, because we all have a signature, we all have a style, we all have a personality. How are your photographs different than somebody else's? What being within inside of you is going to resonate in the work that you produce? Forget about the photography aspects right now. Let's think about who you are as a person. Understand yourself, observe yourself, and you'll figure that the technical parameters to convey that message in photography, but you've got to be paying attention to yourself in the context of life around you. You have to observe that map inside of you. There's something inside of you that you can follow. You have to believe in yourself. You really do. And once you hook into that pathway, that channel, that connection, it's going to come to you. I've always followed the belief system, and you're going to learn a lot about my belief systems, I think, tonight, because whether through my work or through me or both, I don't really look for things. They find me. Always they find me. The harder I look for something, the more elusive they are. That can be inanimate, it can be an organic matter. So I tend to remind students that be patient with yourself, even though sometimes I'm still haven't mastered that, especially with kids today. But be patient with yourself, take the time. I encourage them, they encourage me back. I believe in the kids today. They are the future, and I support everything I can for them. And I will miss that. I really, truly will miss that. And you know something? That's just another recontextualization process for me. I'm observing what I'm going to miss, and something's going to take its place, and I'm not going to look for it, because it will show up.
It's amazing how things always come to light just as they're meant to be. And as one door closes, another one opens. So aerial photography and consciousness. Your work in aerial photography offers viewers a unique way to explore ecological and social issues from above. What initially drew you to aerial photography, and how do you feel this shift in perspective has allowed you to communicate that interconnectedness of natural and human landscapes?
That's a big question. And I could bounce all around in this one. I do recall I spoke to my brother the other day, and I did ask him, where was that lake where we flew on a seaplane? And I was like 6 years old. It was up in Wisconsin. But beyond looking at maps in the car when we traveled, it ingrained in me an aerial perspective. That's where the maps come in. It's an aerial view. It's not a typographical map necessarily, but it's an aerial view of the landscape. And I loved looking at globes, the Atlas, because it's just further away. Your point of view is the Atlas. So the map is kind of an aerial point of view, and we took a ride, like a 30-minute ride. Back, it had to be like 1961, roughly. We had a great time. I don't think my mom enjoyed it, but we had a good time on that seaplane. I think it was the water that kind of got her a little bit up. She's never been a swimmer, but I don't know what that had to do with anything. But the aerial plane, that really stuck with me for many years. Many years. But the board games, this was really important here. I played a lot of board games in the 60s and into the 70s, even into college the first time around, in 73, 74, 75. And board games had an aerial perspective too. If you look at a board game, most of us who are my age, or even a little younger, or even young ones today, I mean, board games are still pretty popular. The kids don't play them that much, they're into the video stuff. But the board games always give you a altruistic point of view. And I started picking up that I like to look at the big picture here. Not that singularity point, but the big picture gives me a little bit of an idea of what I'm like in that place, in there. It's always a collective response that I'm interested in that goes into my work. It's not just about me, it is about you. So the board games on top of the seaplane flight, the maps earlier, and I constantly looked at maps on more trips. But I need to interject this, and we're going to come back to this, I think. One of the first games I learned in life, my brother taught me, was chess. And I actually got pretty good at it. I played chess at least through 11, 12 years old, every week. and I like chess. But I like the idea of the projection, anticipation, the what's going to be my opponent's next move. That strategy aspect of my life really set into my being here. Now, I'll tell you though, that became an Achilles heel for me later on, because what that prevented me from doing, and this will make sense a little later on here, is that it just absorbed all the oxygen from my intuitive side. My intuition did not exist. It was always coming from here. And I, of course, didn't realize that at age 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, but my intuition, I did not rely on it. I didn't trust it. But the games led to eventually more games, and I had an opportunity after I graduated in '77 from USF with a bachelor's degree in art. After a few jobs, I hooked up with a family that was totally into aviation. That was their life. That was their business. That was their lifestyle. And for 5 years almost, that was my lifestyle. And in the interim that, I landed a job, Dylan Reynolds Aerial Photography, that revolved around shooting aerial photographs of Florida. Thinking the idea that I would fly one day, and hey, I got to fly anywhere shooting photographs. I fell in love with photography from that vantage point, and I saw a lot of things I did not expect to see from the air in Florida, the fragile ecosystem in this state. And I was part of the problem. Transplant, what do you do about it? But the people that I shot for, lawyers, bankers, and landowners, they're part of the problem too. Because they were selling their livelihood away. I can't blame anybody. I can't really blame myself. What do you do about that? That became very, very much important in what I saw from that vantage point, from an environmental point of view. But it didn't really come to head until I went into graduate school. This was just kind of, all these things were lying dormant. The maps, the atlases, the games, all of this was building up. And I can't say, as Ansel Adams said, that, you know, really a true artist creates from within, extracted from within rather than extracted from without. And Jerry Usman always made the comment that you invent a reality that has more personal and significant meaning than the one given to you. What can you do about it? How can you create something that's beneficial for your life and for somebody else's? Perhaps the work here tonight will generate something for you that you can take away, or at least give you a recontextualization lint to your own well-being, to your own self-observation process.
Okay, well, speaking of that inner world, let's talk a little bit about the influence of the fourth way. As a believer in the fourth way, which emphasizes the integration of mind, body, and emotion, how does this philosophy inform the way you approach your art and your teaching? Do you see parallels between the conscious effort in spiritual growth and the process of creating or viewing art?
The questions get more profound. Well, there's a map. There's another map here. An introduction first. Listen, I mentioned earlier, I was really never religious. My mom was a devout Christian, Methodist. I was raised a Methodist. I played along. I didn't know what that was about. My brother, the same way. And my dad was an atheist. What a good balance. Really, what a balance. And then I went to college and became an atheist. Strange enough. And then after college, I became an agnostic. I was following a map here. I didn't find the fourth way until things were ready and they found me. And then I became a Baha'i in 1979, and I'm still a Baha'i. I'm still a Methodist at United Plantation Church in Fort Lauderdale. I mean, it's everything. I don't think I would have found the student of the fourth way, but I ran into a community in the late 80s, middle 80s, that introduced me to the Far East religions. And I love religions. I love to talk about religion. I mean, I don't live in an HOA community, and periodically I get people that come by and talk about religion. Actually, I enjoy that. I actually enjoy that. Again, I'm a profound believer in faith, but I'm not necessarily a religious person, which is a paradox and, a conundrum here for me. But it's kind of like, I do believe in this faith in here before I can address anything out there. It comes from here. But getting to the fourth way, George Gurdjieff, a Russian philosopher, poet, mystic, spiritual teacher, he believed that there are three ways to human development, potential human development. The fakir is the physical body, not the adornments, but the physical body. The monk is the emotional side, and the yogi is the mental side. And the fourth way is the observation from the human, the self-development, learning how to observe yourself in reality, in real time, in life, being conscious of who you are, where you are, in the moment, right now, in the moment. That is very, very important. How do you improve yourself? How do you improve yourself in here? Just being aware of your presence in life. And that balances out the circle, the esoteric circle. And that had, again, another profound change in my art. The irony here is I was doing that all along. The self-observation, I just didn't have a place to plant it, which it found me. Again, it found me. And I try to live my life that way. It's about working every day on it. It's about self-observation, making yourself a better person. It's your level of being attracts the level of your life, which was a Ouspensky quotation, who was a student of Gurdjieff. And I'm not just talking about the level of being in here attracts the level of life out there. The level of being in here will also attract the level of life of how you feel inside. So I have several pieces actually in the exhibit that are directly from the fourth way student. Anger that went to sleep, caught up by my own design. And it was at this point, really, caught up in my own design, is where my plan, I was so fixated on this plan, mental strategy, planning everything out, right? And it got to a point that I got caught up and snarled up in my own plan. And it was at that precise moment that I realized, give my intuition a chance to breathe here. So I'm coming back now full circle. My intuition began to have a voice in my life. And that was the late 80s. So it took about 40 years to figure that out. And I'm still not done figuring that out, So the fourth way student, it's an ongoing, you're doing the work, you're trying not to mechanically think, mechanical work, that personality, get out of the personality, self-remember yourself constantly.
Actually, that's fascinating. I have a follow-up question for that. Is there any correlation between that and finding the work that you do in mixed media part of that? Because now you're working more with your hands. You're manipulating your photographic images and making them sculptural. I know they go hand in hand. I'm just curious because I find as an artist working in mixed media and sewing on my artwork and working with objects, that's my spiritual outlet, and it's a very subconscious thing and how you work with things. But is there a correlation with that?
Patience. I'm much more measured in the process of making my mixed media. I came from photography, which was such an expedient method of making art, and I didn't have patience in graduate school. I began working with mixed media, but I didn't have the patience for it, and I started becoming more aware of the moment and not forcing things and walking away from the work. And it really starts here, though. I mean, it's the process is up here. I mean, it's still a lot of original. I see the piece before I begin making it. It's done up here. And then the intuition and the patience and the measured observation and just giving the chance and allowing mistakes to happen. I mean, I embrace mistakes. And sometimes that's not what I intended, and I gotta slap my head a little bit. That's okay. So, and again, it comes from being kind to yourself and allowing those, and I wouldn't call them failures or mistakes really. It's just part of life. You know, I'm you know, to address, to say good versus evil, you know, absolutely there's some useful things in life and some not useful things in life. But I generally look, again, at the big picture here. It's, you know, I can find myself complaining about something so trivial, but it's part of life, you know, and the pieces come more organically in the process method and again, a measured process. And I think, you know, I let the pieces sit for a while and I'll come back. And when I hear them call to me, they'll let me know, you know, I can talk to my trees outside. Really, I can talk to the trees. I mean, it's kind of, where did you hear that before? I mean, it's getting off in a tangent. My son wants a tree house. And my tree houses were epic. They're 3 or 4 stories high. 3 or 4 stories up in Michigan. You know, the penthouse. We didn't have a roof because the tree didn't go any higher. And today I can't pound a nail into the tree. I just feel sorry for the tree. I just can't do that anymore. Though sometimes I have to do things, but it's just, the whole complexity of creating is going to change. I'm just having more, I think, compassion to the things around me.
Thank you for indulging me with that. So this kind of ties into actually the next question about ecological awareness and artistic responsibility. Pieces like tree houses and plant wars reflect your concern for environmental issues. How do you see the role of photography in raising awareness about ecological concerns, and what responsibility do you believe artists have in fostering change?
For me, I don't look for an audience, actually. I do not look for an audience. If the audience wants to come to my work, that's fine. If the change happens, it's on them. I mean, trying to change people, I discovered a long time ago it doesn't work too well unless they're willing to change, if they're willing to listen. So, I mean, from an ecological point of view, I can bring awareness to the people And if they hook on to the piece, if they understand if the level of my articulation or my narrative in the work is comprehensible by them, I think that's good. If they get to talk to me, probably better. Maybe I can reach them, which I do with my students. That's a plus, talking with my students. Tree houses and is that playground or sorry? Plant Wars, excuse me. When I make pieces, I approach pieces in a duality. Tree houses is really about not just building a tree house and the memories I have. And I might inject that, that altitude again. Being up in the treehouse, I find peace up there. Listen, it was a survival mechanism for me when I was young. I went to the trees when my neighbors were bullying me. They were picking on me. I escaped their wrath, climbing a tree, a willow tree in Park Forest, Illinois. That's kind of how it began my hike, because the high ground has an advantage. And they would not chase me. They lost the use of one of their arms because they had to hang on with the other. And if you were above them, I had the advantage. And I would keep on going higher and higher and higher to the point where their fear would overcome mine. Because I just had to think about what they might do if they catch me. Now, if my brother was home, that would change the dynamics a little bit, being 4 years, 4 months, and 6 days older. So that changed. And these two kids were 1 year and 2 years older than me, which is a big difference when you're 6, 7 years old. So getting back to the tree house, it's about me, it's about trees, but it's actually about the industrial complex. It's about what's going on with resources around us, how big companies are merging and how they're swallowing up smaller companies. I'm very concerned about that. Not just here, everywhere. And that ties into plant wars. And plant wars is, again, indicative to industry, plants. My father's farm was gobbled up by a giant company, which a lot of farmers are facing even today. And the indigenous versus the invasive plants in Florida, even things that are live beyond the plants. I see that in my backyard. I saw that from the air. So it's an ecosystem that's being challenged by plants being brought over to this country, even from other countries. It doesn't stop here. So those two pieces kind of address that. What are we going to do about it? Our society is very good at fixing things once they're broken, but we're very poor at preventive maintenance. I've never seen it. There's always exceptions. And actually the fourth way is helping me find those exceptions. I'm trying to take care of my body. It starts from here. It starts one person at a time. What can you do about it? I don't know. That's up to you. I can't do anything about what you want to do. I can just enlighten you to maybe some possibilities that you can follow. A map that might take you to that place where you can actually do something about it.
I think Barton Gilmore is officially my yogi. I hope that's okay. If I can be your grasshopper. Personal identity and artistic expression. Much of your work, like Organic Facade and Treehouse, explores themes of personal identity and memory, as you were just talking about. How do you use photography and mixed media to communicate deeply personal narratives, and how does your process help you reflect on your own life?
I think I have to go back to the attic on this one. organic facade really, for me, is about shedding all the adornments, all the, again, the superficial things that I don't really find useful. It's either egotistical or just, again, not useful. I don't shame anybody that wants to wear, for example, jewelry. I used to wear that, but the organic pieces kind of shed all that and highlight sometimes how entrenched we get into things that are not important. And again, I don't want to generalize and preach to you about how to operate your life. Just really comes from my life, but collectively, it's just an interesting observation how we prioritize things in life. And I think going back to the attic, to the farm, I spent a lot of time on the farm, my grandfather's farm, summers, holidays, Easter time, Thanksgiving, not all the time, but we went there in Illinois, between Peoria and Chicago, and the attic. It's one of my very favorite places to go. In Livonia, Michigan, it was the basement. Because in the attics we store things, we store memories, we store so many opportunities. It's such a time capsule. Very a precious time capsule. And I can tell you, I mean, I'm getting off the track here, but it's you know, I'm not a hoarder. I can throw things out really easy, but what's becoming so profoundly difficult for me as I get older, when I go into the attic, and I have an appointment with the attic here, coming up here in the next couple of months, I find things that I haven't seen in a while. And the context that they provide me, the memories that I have buried for 25 years, they just kind of spring up. I forgot I had these memories, and nobody else has these memories, and no one else will ever have those memories. And if I throw those pieces of articles out, they're going to be gone forever. I can't throw things out now as much as I used to. I mean, it's like, no, this can't be. You know, I've got, you know, my kids don't want this. They really don't want this. I don't want to burden them on that. And my parents always said, don't listen. And I went through a lot of my parents' stuff before they passed, getting rid of things. And I started attaching myself to some of these things because I had context to those things too. But the attic at my grandfather's was his memories. And that was important. That actually, he worked in the basement and created these wonderful pieces. I watched him. And he had the patience of a snail. He really did. I never saw him frown, nor my mom frown their entire life. And the patience he demonstrated, and I just watched and observed, he instilled something that did not really surface for 20, 30 years later. I mean, it was something that, a lot of these things lie dormant. And that is something you have to have faith in. The things that you are influenced by, people, experiences, they're there. And they'll surface. When the timing is right, when you allow them in, you know, and for me, they surface my artwork.
Thank you for that. All right. Speaking of things and memories, mixed media and boundaries. Over time, you've integrated various materials and techniques into your work. Can you speak to the evolution of your mixed media practice and how pieces like Groundwork and Playground merge photography with other art forms to push the boundaries of visual communication?
I'll start with the second half of that question here. Pushing the boundaries. I don't know if I do. I might. I think it's up to the audience to kind of figure that out. I do push the boundaries in my daily life, You know, I am a risk taker. I'm not careless or reckless like I used to be, but I do push the boundaries in my everyday life. I do take chances. So the pushing the boundaries, if my artwork does reach something new and refreshing, maybe controversial, because I do believe controversial issues are important, then be it. That's fine. Playground, or actually I'll start with groundwork. Groundwork was that root out in front of the part of my house, which I mowed around for many years. And I waited for it to speak to me, and I eventually became a self-portrait for me. It's a community. I observe communities collectively. Again, from the air, I observe the communities collectively from a different altitude. So communities are very important to me, and how they work, the intricacies of them. And it kind of, again, reminds me of my place in that communities to some degree. Playground, which I created during COVID, again, there's 2 points to playground. One is watching my kids play in the playground, which I think is a natural aspect of being a parent, and watching the interactions between kids. And all the acquaintances, all these people, they funnel in that experience into my artwork. I'm just absorbing it slowly. But watching my kids play and get along or not get along, or the rivalry, how they mingle, the connections. But you know, the piece is not so much about that, but it is about that. It's about, I love to play creating my art. That is my playground, making art. And during COVID, it was, again, I spent a lot of time making art, making that piece. So playground is my art of making pieces. I mean, that's my playground. And I can tell you right now, through the conversation, this dialogue right now, being in the moment, I have an idea that I'm going to add to a piece when I get home tonight. Right now, that moment is right now. So I do look forward to getting back to my new piece, which we hopefully can talk about. But that is, but without you, it would not have happened right at this moment. And it's about being in the moment, being aware of what's going on, what I'm communicating to you, what I'm communicating to myself, what I'm enlightening myself about.
I think it's kind of interesting that when you talk about observing playgrounds, especially through the lens of COVID and our experiences in COVID, the juxtaposition of Dolores Coe's exhibition, which is in the center gallery here at the museum, Dolores Coe's Lost Worlds, which we are debuting her Passage series. You have this macro viewpoint of the playground in a way, and she has the micro view of the playground through the childhood perspective during COVID, that her paintings were developed during COVID, and it's in response to a children's world and their sense of play. So I encourage you to compare those two when you wander the galleries later. It's just an interesting observation. Formalism and artistic development. Your early work was influenced by formalism, but your later incorporated more abstract and mixed media elements. What inspired this shift, and how has it shaped your artistic development throughout your career?
Well, I was introduced to formalism when I entered the program at USF in '73, and actually I was doing some abstract in those days. The foundation, the infrastructure of the pieces were there, but not the content. I didn't have a voice yet. I was still learning photography, but I have to admit that and say that I was very much influenced by the Cubist movement and the Futurist movement. Those two movements had a very, very important influence on me. the Cubist movement, I mean, I was one with that work. It actually gave me pause and peace looking at those pieces. I could look at that work all the time. That was my first love of any movement. And then the futurist is such a high energy, a lot of movement in those pieces, and that's been me all my life. I don't sit down, I don't rest. That's my metabolism. I can't explain it, but they just resonated with me. So the abstract was there. And again, jumping ahead here, the piece Shattered Mirage, which I know is in here someplace, now it's speaking to me. It actually has the content. I just didn't see it, 45 years ago when I made it. But now it's surfacing. So it's kind of interesting to absorb that. Being Shattered Mirage, I mean, it's talking about, again, the superficial, the mirror, what's important is inside, not the superficial outside, to me. So, but how does it migrate into my abstractness today? I mean, I don't know if I have an answer to that. I start with a design, the process. I think that's what attracts me to making something, that energy, the futurist energy, the diagonal lines, just to get down to the roots of it, and mix that in with some kind of organic material, the piece I'm working on right now, which I have a title for. I'd like to come up with titles first, which once I have that title, it's the blueprint. It is the map for me. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm gonna go right there. That means I'm gonna follow the maps, the tentacles. I'm gonna get there. Maybe it's gonna shift a little bit, allow intuition, because again, I would rather drive to Portland, Oregon than fly any day and go off on a tangent. That's my means, and maybe that's because we drove so much as a young person. Flying, if you don't have the time, fine, but you just miss out on so much when you go from point A to point B when you fly. I'd rather drive. So the map in the new piece is called actually Arteries. It's called Arteries. It's about connections. It's about channels. It's about passages that Dolores mentioned. It's about veins, arteries. It's about the heart. It's about my dad. And I told my dad, by the way, once you're cremated, if you don't mind, I'm gonna use some of your ashes. He was okay with that. I knew the answer. He was fine with that, because it is partly about him. I don't know if I was all over that question, but I don't know if I answered it.
I think you did. Well, I very much appreciate you giving a little insight into the piece that you're working on. It's come full circle, it seems like, especially as you talk about maps and childhood and more lifeblood and end of life, and it's still a roadmap, an interior roadmap. It's fascinating. Technology and the human condition. As technology continues to evolve rapidly, particularly with the rise of AI, how do you balance the use of technological advances in your photography while maintaining a focus on the human experience and connection?
I haven't been able to balance that out yet. I mean, AI, I've been working with it on the outside of it for about a year and a half with some software. I'm not sure where it's going. I mean, I can tell you, for one thing, one of my reasons for exiting the college, which has been so generous to me, and what a privilege to be here at the school, is technology is so daunting. It's so difficult for me to stay up with it, and it's not just an age thing, which I get that. I'm experiencing that now in real time. right? I mean, I know some friends who are in their 40s and 50s, and they are challenged by technologies changing. What happened to the day when all you had to remember is to set your alarm clock, and that was it? Now it's, charging everything, doing this, doing that. It's enormous challenge for me. And where AI is going, I think it's very exciting to watch. I want to do it on my own time, a measured time. And if you're in the educational field, it's daunting, it's continuous. It's not just 3 or 4 months away, it's every week something's changing on it. And it's difficult for me to change. Not challenging, it's difficult, let's use the word. It's hard for me. I do subscribe to Ray Kurzweil, a computer science guru who, and this dovetails into the new peace artery, that the singularity, which comes to the method, the idea of singularity, derived from quantum physics, is about where AI and humanity are going to merge. We are already merging there. And that is something we need to get used to. Real quick. I don't know if it's going to be for me, but it's something that it's here. And I'm just going to stay on the sidelines probably and watch it happen. I mean, I do now understand the phrase, please stop the world, I want to get off. Because there are times I just want to get off and watch and start being part of it. But actually, when you have a 7-year-old and 12-year-old, that's not going to happen. And that changes everything. The recontextualization process, I have my kids to thank that for. That's a blessing. Requires a lot of patience, but that's a blessing.
Thank you. Speaking of children and legacy and impact, as this exhibition marks a significant moment in your career, what do you hope will be your lasting impact on your students, the SPC photography program, and the Tampa Bay art community? How do you envision your work and influence continuing to resonate into the future?
Well, legacy and I have never really understood one another. I don't necessarily subscribe to what that meaning is. That's the truth. I think legacy is up to you, to the audience. It's not up to me. And for me to even understand, I'm not going to be around to witness it. I can only say that if somebody comes up to me and says, listen, a student, a current or past student, says, I really learned something from your class. I enjoy that. Maybe down the road, as I realize a lot of the teachers I've had the pleasure and privilege of working with and teaching me, some of those things pop up that I never thought would be there. The photographer teachers and artists at USF, from Suzanne Camp Crosby to Oscar Bailey, to David Yeager, to Vicky Hurt, to Lou Marcus, to other artists, Fred Ensley. I didn't know if I mentioned Fred Ensley, the Bruce Marsh, Lynn Dietrich, Bernard Larson. I mean, these people and more, and have influenced me. Even students have influenced me. Other institutions, the Art Institute. I mean, they're always giving to me. That never stops. They constantly give to me right now. If I can leave something for somebody that might show up someday, that's wonderful. But legacy is something that I don't understand that word too much. I sometimes say, well, my kids are my legacy. I figure, I can be a pragmatic fatalist and realist all in one, and optimist and all in one breath. There's a balance there someplace. I almost feel like at one point or another, we're all going to be distilled down to a few megabytes of information for historical purposes. Maybe some people will get gigabytes, but for a lot of us, most of us, megabytes. And that's the reality of it, and that's okay. You just can only focus on what's going on right now. As far as the St. Peter photo department, it's going to be fine. It will adapt to what the students need right now, not the other way around. Departments need to conform to what students need, and that has to be learned, and it'll be fine. The photography department's in great hands. I'll miss it. It's been a wonderful experience. Again, as I've said before, I could not script the 33 years the way it's went. I'll leave this with, again, back to my father, who reminded me of all the energy I've always had. And he said, never stop moving. That's the key to life. Keep moving. Not just physically, but metaphorically and spiritually. I think he was becoming more of an agnostic close to his life. That's a funny way how close to death you become to see things differently. You recontextualize life and everything that's happened to you, and you just welcome whatever happens next, right? And you have faith in something, right? You gotta have faith in something, but keep moving. And I like to just say and conclude with, I feel I'm just warming up right now.
I would say so. It sounds like you have a lot of work to do come December, 15th, 18th, when is your last day?
Well, the last day of teaching is December 6th. And so I'll be active in the community. I'll keep on doing my work and dealing with the kids, which is fine. Everything looks fine. It's what else is there?
Well, your legacy is alive and well at the Leepa Rattner Museum of Art, not only marking this milestone exhibition, but we do have your work in our permanent collection, along with many of the photography colleagues that you mentioned, the roster of other photography educators in the Tampa Bay area that we celebrate alongside your work. Barton's photographs were on view in our permanent collection gallery for quite some time and will be rotated through again soon, but they're collected and preserved in our permanent collection. So we celebrate you and your legacy. Thank you, Barton. We can open this up for some questions. We would love to know what time it is so that we can... 7:18? Wonderful. Who has a question for Barton? I'm sorry, we have one microphone. If you speak up, we'll repeat your question. Anybody?
What does it look like, and what kind of emotions do you go through when you realize that a project is finished? How do you determine that?
What do I go through, and what kind of emotions do I experience when the piece is finished, or something like that? My first thought is, what's the next piece? And I'll circle around. I have multiple pieces I'm working on up here, and maybe a couple pieces I'm working actually physically on. And I'm excited to get to all of these. I sometimes feel like a piece is never finished. It's just the work in this museum here, the arteries piece, will actually incorporate a lot of the different things that are in this piece. And actually, as artists, you try to one-up it. You try to kind of like, you got to do something even more powerful. for me, I mean, I'm like, not for the audience, but how I observe it. And the piece I'm working on now, I'm so excited about this piece. This is for an undisclosed cardiologist. It's ideal for this occupation. So, I mean, you know, I can see it becoming finished, but I can also see it how it dovetails into another piece very quickly, because I borrow the processes and borrow the ideas, and all these ideas are linked.
The emotional
side is completed when it's hanging up. And once the show was hung, I was done with it. I was completely done with it. I was moved on. You know, you know, it's kind of like, all the pieces are like crying, or like they're, what? Abandoning me, you know, but it's done. It's done. And it's, wherever it goes, but I'm now focused on the new pieces, all my emotion. You know, when I dropped off the work and saw, I mean, I was done, you know, it was done. I concluded it, and it's like, okay, who's next? You know, so great question.
I would have to agree with that. You just, you know, it's all about the process and the emotion and going through that process, and then it's almost like, oh, okay, it's done. I guess I'll get to the next one. Oh, that's such a good question. Who else has a question? Anybody? Clarence?
Are there any artists you draw inspiration from? And if so, what about their work would you like to incorporate into your work?
Are there any inspiration I draw, or I draw inspiration from artists? And the second part was,
were there any artists that you draw inspiration from?
Okay.
And if so, what about their work would you like to incorporate into yours?
well, I still draw from George Rock. I mean, Cubist. I go back to the early 20th century. Current artists, you know, I'm inspired by the narratives, probably not the process. I would say I do like Gregory Crutzen, what he's trying to convey, a photographer who makes these epic kind of environmental installations, and I do like what he's trying to communicate. The production side of it is fascinating for me. It's overwhelming for me. My production is very narrower than his production, but I like what he's trying to communicate. So I do get inspired by his work. But I still go back to the roots of early 20th century Joseph Stella, futurists. I mean, I'm still learning about the old artist. I'm not a historian, even though I teach history of photography. I've never been really well versed in it. I'm still learning it. So I kind of go back and research. I love teaching understanding art. You know, one of my favorite classes is understanding art, not photography, because I'm learning the context of these artists much better now. I've evolved to the point where now I get it, what's going on. So it's kind of like, I didn't like history in the 70s, you know. I didn't like it, you know. It wasn't my favorite forte, but now I love it. You know, it's kind of, so, but Gregory Crutzen is a talented artist right now. I've always been inspired by Suzanne Camp Crosby, my first Photo 1 teacher. The discipline that she delivered to her students, including me, the work ethic was very important. The patientness, which I wasn't ready to receive, but it did take patience. But I do still hear her voice, along with all the artists. But she's a very inspiration artist to this day. Thank you.
Anybody else have a question? Anybody?
What made you want to become a photographer?
What made you want to become a
That's a really good question. I had an Instamatic Kodak 104 that I took some pictures when I was like maybe 13 years old, and I think I had a inclination to the visual. I think TVs, the introduction to TVs in our household in the 60s was a stepping stone. In the 60s, Patrick, that if you saw early 60s, unless you had Look or Like magazine, you only saw maybe a few photographs in one day, if that. And now if you don't see 500 in one day, you're behind. You're behind. But the inspiration. I was a sociology major and a psychology major at first. And I was doubly majoring in art because I needed to take art classes as a distribution to meet my requirements for my degree in sociology and psychology. So I had to declare as an art major. And I took one class just as, hey, I'm curious, I like photography. Just a lot of students do today. They take it and I took it and I like it. I think I'll take another class. And I took another class and I still liked it. And I took another class. And I let the psychology and sociology kind of fall to the wayside. And I figured I could always practice that in my art, if you haven't figured that out by now. That's where I'm very much involved in the psychology and sociology of people. So I kind of it found me. And I started taking classes and it said, welcome. Let me show you what else I can teach you. And the teachers were very instrumental in that. And they got me excited, just like I try to get the students excited today.
It's a wonderful question. Oh, over here.
I'm sorry I missed the beginning or an introduction, but are you planning to retire here in Florida? And have you considered, once you leave, a structured sort of artisty type environment? Is that going to be easier to produce outside of that kind of environment? Or do you think you may miss that structural kind of artsy environment as you become more of an artist?
I'll address that question by first saying that I see so many shows that entice young and new artists to show their work. And I haven't forgot your question. It just reminded me of the shows that are out there, and I almost feel like they're not for me anymore, and that's not to be. I always feel like they're for the youth of today, and I don't want to infringe on the youth of today. As far as the community, and I'm trying to grapple with that question because I wanted to answer and then I kind of forgot part of the question, and that can probably be due to my age, I have to say. But I'm going to be a Florida resident for probably the rest of my life. I don't see me going anywhere, even though I would like to move. I would. I'm tired of the traffic again. I don't dislike Florida. I want to see new places, but I don't see that happening. I'm a realist now. I'm going to be here, and I probably will pass away here. Be quiet. Now, what about how do people review or look at my art in other locations? I kind of think about, it's interesting that, and I've been in shows in other places regionally, and people in Colorado love Florida pictures, and people in Florida love Colorado pictures. I just tend to find that, wherever you go, if you're moving to promote your work, if you're moving to maybe collect a different audience, it reminds me when I photographed sports for the Miami Dolphins and for Fort Lauderdale Strikers. And if you follow the ball, you'll never catch the shot. You have to wait for the ball to come to you. And if I stay stationary, long enough, maybe something will come to me. It will find me. I'm not going to, look out there. I don't know if I'm fairly addressing your question, and I apologize if I kind of meandered around that. But I'm here to stay. I'm gonna continue making artwork. Am I gonna put it out there? I'd like to think so, but it's more important that I make the art than it is to exhibit it. And that might be selfish, but it's a lot of work to make artwork, and it's another job to promote it. It's another job to manage your website. It's just so much work, and it's recognition is, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it's okay. It would be nice to see another audience, just to see what they think someplace else. They may have to come down here to see it though, because I certainly don't think I'm going to go anywhere else. Thank you.
Do you think, and I think part of the question too was if when you leave the structure of the college, will that change your how you're creating, since you feed so much, the creative side of it feeds so much off of the people that you work with every day who you teach?
Thank you for that lapse. No, okay, that's absolutely. The students, number one. I mean, I'll find something else. Something else will form and take shape. I'm working on a piece. I'll give you a metaphor. I'm working on a piece right now, mentally and some physically. It's called Side Dish. Side Dish, and it's about the main dish having so much on my plate. I have no more room. I can't see the food underneath the food. And now I have a side dish because that's where it's going. And I know if I remove something off the plate, something will fill it. But I've got to the point where I'm going to have a side dish on the art scene. There's certainly got to be some input. I think I'm a loner in very many ways. And my imagination is always on steroids, it seems like. I don't have trouble conjuring up things and ideas. I do need that outside stimulus, and the students are number one, but I'll find it, or it will find me, okay? I'll get there. I'm not gonna worry about it, but I am aware of it, and I just want to observe myself, how I react to the change and being in the moment. That's important.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, question.
You spoke early on about reflection, looking at your reflection, looking at other reflections. When the show opened on the 24th, and you were there with all the people that were there at the opening, did you stand back at all, or did you have the time to stand back and see the others reacting to the work visually? And if so, did you reflect on the work or reflect on their response to the work? Were you able to stand back and notice that?
And this was after talking about the reception.
At the reflection, at the reception, or in the context of even tonight,
Okay.
when somebody goes in?
Great question, Artie. At the reception, I had very little opportunities to observe people, but they came to me and told me about the work. And I have to include, I wrote a single-page email to Sarah Felice about my experience of what I heard from people telling me about their work. That's probably where I didn't see that. They came to me and told me about the work. Even text me, even phone calls afterwards. And I tried to express that. I hope she shared. Probably spoke. But being in real time. But I was trying to express in this email all the the responses that I got, because I didn't really have an opportunity. And I've only had a little bit of an opportunity when I've been here several times afterwards to look at the work. But even in the present now, the questions are already regurgitating. I won't forget these questions because you are fueling me, you're providing resources to me right now, in real time, in the moment. So these questions are valuable to me, more important than my responses to them. So, but great question, and it's all, I'm taking it all in, and you know, I cannot express how much I cherish this moment.
I have a question. So Barton, do you see yourself having a style of photography, or do you see yourself changing in your style?
I'm trying to figure out my style in myself still. You know, you set yourself up, Kathy, on that one. But no, I understand if whatever I do here is going to reflect in my artwork. Do you guys see it? Do you, maybe you will understand it more now after this. I'll throw the question back at you. Most of you saw the work before you came into this talk. How are you going to respond to it when you go back now? Are you going to look at it differently? I know I am. When I look at my own work, which some of these pieces have been around for me for 50 years, but I'm going to be looking at it differently. Again, how are you going to look at that? Maybe you'll see my style. I think people out there, I mean, Lou Marcus was so, at USF, was so good at finding things in my work that I did not see myself. You almost need other people to see that. That's why I need you. You're part of this. You're part of the process. So, you know, maybe you can, and I say this redundantly, rhetorically, maybe you can answer that question yourself because you're in a better position to do so, I feel. But I'm aware of that question. And I'm going to try to remove myself to see, step away out of my shoes into something else that, you know, that I have to step out and look at myself. Thank you for that question.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? Oh, one more. Okay.
Sure, that's not really a question. When I was in looking at your exhibit, not tonight, but I was here prior, and I was looking at your pictures, and I always like to look at the perspective from what is hung on the wall and then tilt. But looking at it in the booklet is nicer because you can even just totally turn the orientation and then see something different. So I just wanted to say that I really enjoyed doing that, listening to you, listening to what you're saying, remembering my impressions, and then totally turning it around.
Well, thank you for the observation. I think some of these pieces, I'm sure others would want to turn it around too, and I do that quite often just to see what works. And some pieces, there's a few pieces in there that I feel you could rotate a couple times, 90 degrees or even 180 degrees, and it would probably maybe reveal some things you didn't see the other way around. I mean, I think that was something that some of the earlier teachers taught me to turn pictures upside down and where does your eye go to first? For tonal wise, for color, for content, for design qualities. So I think that is part of the process, and thank you for observing that very much.
Well, I want to thank Barton for sharing so much with us, and your exhibition is a direct conduit to the inner workings of your brain, and you are all of those things, part inventor, part historian. It's incredible to have you share all of that insight with us. I certainly am walking away very inspired to go home and do some artwork myself. I want to thank you all so much for coming this evening and sharing in this sort of intimate conversation. You can join us in the galleries. We have a few more minutes, and you can talk with Barton directly. And we just thank you so much for being a part of this special evening. Great. Thank you.